Yeah, another day in paradise. Peace and blessings, you know. I've been coming out in the evening time. We're in April. April is like how it is that they say in the April showers. Yeah, we get a lot of April showers for real. So the sun go away about 3 o'clock and rain comes from then. So I'm doing the evening shift for now. I go with the cycle, how I feel. You know, that's one thing it is when you trying to align yourself with not just nature, but what it's all about, being a god. And that's what the topics is going to be really about because, people is interested in the truth. And for you to understand the truth, you understand first who you are in reference to your reality. So we're going to start off by understanding a lot. And this will put everything into perspective because one thing you're doing the solar logos is God. That means, we don't adhere to anything in this reality. We're here to learn. We're sent here to learn as gods, higher beings, angelic beings, white lighters, whatever you want to call yourself, dark lighter, witch, Magnus, whatever, shaman. You're still here to learn. You didn't just come and build with the art in you, even though you do, but it's to use it, practice it, good ways, bad ways, all type of ways. So that's what we're going to focus on right now, because really, this journey now, you could say, is like when you become this God, it's a journey to ascension. And so you don't cling to nothing in this reality. Everything in this reality is a part of the journey, and to learn is to actually test it. Test yourself. Test everything about you, and you will come to logical conclusions or things that work and things that don't work. That's where we get our egos and our splits in our personality from different things we've tried. Well, anyways, all this aligns with like what we was talking about with the law of heredity. We're gonna continue with there because a lot of people is interested in it. A lot of these topics too I redo on my Facebook. So if you don't understand fully what I'm talking about, most of the time after I do these videos, I'll be having the same topic going on my Facebook so that you could go more in depth on it anyway. That's Damian Samuels. If you want to check out my Facebook, it's Damean Samuel. So now, let's get into this law of heredity real quick while we got some time. The thing with that is that, excuse me, is that we see, it's like they got different stories. What's up, Rock? You got different stories of what took place in our reality. And we got different people who put it into their story, which we call history. And by now, we're not idiots, so I shouldn't have to make a big detail about everything in history is fake, depending on who's the ruling power, with them abolishing the information of the last civilization that was there. So it's not in their favor to even give us a speck of information about what was there prior to them being there. And this is how our modern history is. We being taught to idolize and worship the current ruling power without it being actual truth. And so we want truth. We have to look outside and beyond our culture, beyond what was the actual body that is the political rulers that give us our books, our history, our educational system. Because one thing is one, and then you have the occult, you know. The occult, you could say, just really mean black people information, the truth, things that's actually here, recorded, kept in museum, hidden in French, Italian, German, everything except for what the new age people or the new generation is supposed to read. So you only got old people and a lot of people who actually is doing their doctrines that write these books or do these theses that brings to light some of the ancient truths into modern truths. And that's how it becomes our modern research and science. So for us now to learn our occult self, this is the real truth. You have to venture into for yourself. It's not something that's taught really, not just in mainstream, but you can't understand it even in reading occult books unless you've taken this journey yourself. So once you're able to take the journey, you realize you got to have a reasoning ability to read between the lines of all the information and data left here as footprints for us to put together, make sense of using logical reasoning to draw conclusions of the past. So on that note, let's stick to these subjects. Like, for instance, the dynasties of Egypt, Kemet. Okay, you got to look. If it was recorded in history, it's not true history, because the recorder of history was the conqueror. If you look at writing itself on a whole, writing is a new thing, printing is a new thing. Our ancestors saw images copied onto anything as taboo, a curse. So it was only word of mouth from tribe to tribe, and it stood within a tribe or community. It didn't go from this tribe over here to that tribe. They had their own ways, and each one had their own gods. And so everybody lived like that. But when you get a power that comes and dominate those communities, they're taught to bow to one God. And that's the ruling power God. So their renouncing of their gods has to be done, or they're going to be killed, beheaded, which destroyed a lot of our ancestors. I mean, not just their memories, not just their artifacts. I mean, actually races that was wiped out, that is part of the black gene pool or the Negro gene pool, that is unheard of today. And so, I'm not, yes, brother, and I'm not just going to equate it in just those. There is other races too, like the Mamelukes. Mamelukes is one I just was reading about last night. We got these so-called whites. They was around the time of the Egyptians too. They snuck across from the Caucasus Mountains and was in Egypt, but they were slaves there. Everybody kept them enslaved. That was called the Mamelukes, and they snuck in eventually because they mixed with the indigenous people. And that's where we're going to head into, so we understand something. Because not just as the information of Egypt was wiped out from the first time that it was conquered, it's been conquered plenty of times. You're talking 4,000 years of, them defending themselves or whatever. So whenever they was conquered, everything of theirs was wiped out, including the people was distributed in different parts of the country, except for in Egypt. And the Persians occupied Egypt, and other countries occupied Egypt. But we're going to talk about those Mamelukes, right? Those people, because they was a Caucasian group. This was around 5,000 BC or whatever, or earlier, that kept trying to invade Egypt. They did it a few times, but they mixed up with a few people. And this is where you get these funny trick things coming in now with the races, because now these Mamelukes became the mulattoes. And the trick to it is that they realized they violated, and this is where God come into this, and everything is funny when you learn the laws of hybridity, because in there it tells you that once you leave the geographical area of your actual birthplace, where you root race come from, and you just move over to a new climate, switching over to the right just a little bit to the climate change, it causes sterilization if you come across another race. You can only occupy a body of land, which still is going to lead to sterilization in future generations, but you cannot go to someone else's territory that's occupied and occupy it. By the races mixing, or just that group that left their designated area come to a new area, they actually lose their chromosomes. Their chromosomes start fading out because it's a mixture of genetics. Regardless if they have sex or not, just in the air. The genetics of the trees of, like, say, Mali is not the same as the genetics of the trees in the middle of Africa. You understand? And then all the way now to South Africa is different. The genetic flow is different in all three. So you might have different You might see one group of dark-skinned people or brown-skinned people, you could say, but genetically they're still different. They vibrate all at different frequencies. That's what makes them different. Now, these so-called ones that was kept mixing with the indigenous people, they realized only way they could prolong their life was to have sex with the actual indigenous, the black peoples, the Asiatics, the Nubians. And so you started getting these mixtures that brought about your Anglo what is it? Not even Anglo, your Aryan race, your Euro-Indo race started coming from these people meeting up together. You got your Berbers came from them. These Berbers is actually also what's called the Moors. The Moors is not what we think. What we call Moors here in America is not. It's called Moorish. He didn't Noble Drew Ali didn't make a mistake by saying Moors. He said Moorish Science Temple, and you could go into the Black's Dictionary. I think the first edition, second edition, but all of them really, yes, brother, have all that information in it, and you will see there is a difference between what's a Moor and what's a Moorish thing. And so we're, as an American, a Moorish Science Temple, and we are the Moorish people, not the actual Moors, which would then be equated to a mulatto mixed breed. You understand? They're mixed. And they was also on the verge of extinction, so they kept interbreeding with the indigenous Africans that was regular there. But it's just like here. The Negroes, the indigenous people from the Caribbean, you don't notice them, but you notice their kids. They make beautiful kids when they mixed up with other people, but them themselves, short, prickly haired things, nobody respect them, and eventually they die off. And the mulatto or the mixed one go on and take all the credit or become stronger, which they are, and dominating and smarter and more spiritual and more consciousness. This is real stuff. This is real. Later on you understand it, because then this leads to what we call different stages, where you have the savage, the barbarian, and the civilization. These are actually terms made up by the Romans, but it has a very legitimate theme once you understand how it actually worked, because we would think savage would be a group of people who's in a certain state, but in their definition you're just looking at savage being people who didn't have the ability to make fire or pots. They was just primitive. And you say barbarian is when they had pots, make fire, had a weapon, and civilized was when they knew how to transcend all that into poetry, music, all that stuff. Now the thing to that, all of that ran concurrent. It didn't run separately. It wasn't happening at a different time. You would go to some parts of Africa, and that's how they was living in a savage state. Walk over around, and there was other ones who was living barbarian. Go to the other side of Africa, and you had people living civilized. So everything was concurrent all over the world at the same time. It was dependent on the genetics. The genetics is the important part now. Now that we understand that, when these, I'm using just the Egyptian version of the story with the Mamelukes or whatever, because nobody know about them, and they was a problem, and they were the precursor to a lot of off races that's here today too. You understand? And so we'll get to understand more that these hybrid mixes is like trouble, because even though the original was from the Caucasus Mountains and is Caucasian, by the time they got to Egypt and started mixing or being a part of that civilization, which wasn't in Egypt, they was just living or resided in around the Nile Valley. But they mixed up now with the people of, like you could say, would be that Southwest Africa and North Africa. I mean, North Middle Africa, which is where you would get your Muslims and all them from. All the Muslims hybrid. You got to understand that they're mixed up with the Mamelukes, and those was the wars that took place between them and the Ottomans. The Ottomans and the whatever you call them, Mamelukes. You could look it up. I think it's AME or AMALUKES. These people's They got a funny history. They try to keep white people history a secret because in Egypt they were slaves. But it's nothing, you know what I'm saying? You gotta respect the truth. So, anyways, these Mamelukes wound up mixing and keep interbreeding, which brought about the Muslims, which they kept fighting amongst themselves because this blood, this genetic, that's all it brought about. But now you have the Ottomans who came from the mixture of the Ethiopians and Asiatics. That's why Indians and Arabs look the goddamn same. They come from the same group. And the Europeans, the Indo meaning that they mix with them Amaleks. You understand? And so there's another group that is still pure that didn't leave the Caucasus Mountains still yet ain't come out. These is the group that we call the Saxons, the Brits, or the Goths. You understand? All still one. So you got to understand these things. Once we knock out all this stuff, you can't be lied to. You can't be deceived. You could catch it in under many different names. You understand what's really going on. And then we can narrow it down to us, our black people, Egypt, the real truth. But first you got to take out all the bullshit. That's what we're doing, taking out the bullshit. You understand what I'm saying? All right. So now, being that the Ottoman, we're talking about them, they took over. It's aggressive genetics. That's what it does. Even excuse me, the genetics of the Egyptians was a mix because the mix really started occurring in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the first real civilization where everybody was like the melting pot. It was where trade was. It was where wisdom and knowledge was. It was where actually you could say the Negroes, which is, we're going to call the Negroes the first people, the first gen, God's people, man. And then the next group in the middle of Africa now, because we're coming from west to east. But now in the middle, you got what's called the Kafars, the Hottentot, and the Etruscans. You see, now shit changed. Their genetics changed. Their features changed. Their looks changed. The Etruscans is going to go up north and become the Romans. You understand? The Hottentot and them is going to go and be over there in Australia, New Guinea, and all that. Everybody's going to change, but they're losing heredity, their chromosomes. Everything is changing. So, only way that kept preserving, because you can't look at, oh wow, they left and they're all going to die. What kept preserving them to make them live is they kept fucking the indigenous people. So the indigenous ones is the pure breed ones kept their line going. Every race did that, from the Indians in America, the Mexicans. Don't let everybody fool you. The black woman was fucking everybody because she had the genes for everybody to sustain themselves. They're not telling y'all that. That's why America right now is going into the problem. If you Google Western America, is America that's actually having the sterility problem, Australia and New Guinea. This was written a long time ago in the books, and so you get to realize it has a legitimate claim here. It's GMO people, soulless people. You're caught up all in the mix of this. So what do? You have to learn that you have to isolate yourself and figure out which one are you in this. Are you this part of this group or this part of the original group? Once you get to figure that out, you have to follow original tradition. Original tradition was never put in books because they didn't write it down. You remember we say the ancestors didn't do imagery or recording anything. It was only the conquering body wrote. Anything that's written was written by somebody who already was educated and knew this stuff. We wasn't thinking of those type of things. You understand? So Egyptians want to name Egypt. It's like, why would you name it the black land? And if you didn't see the white land, the red land, you wouldn't say the black land. If you didn't go to other territories in comparison, you wouldn't do that. Like if you actually read the history books, they say they go there and ask them, what's the name of your place? What is this called? They don't know what the fuck they talking about. All history books say the same thing. Nobody named their land that live on there. It's the people who comes there that name it for them. So once you understand that concept, you get the whole idea of what's really going on. You understand what I'm saying? So now when you look at these definitions we want it to be understandable to us. So what they doing, they creating understandable things through Google, through YouTube, that is just defining things, but it's not telling you the truth. It's a difference between truth and telling and defining something. We define things for ego reasons. The truth is already inside of you. You don't need to know the name of it. It's like if I show you God. You can't ask me what's his name. There you go. You don't have a name. Your mother, your parents named you. You don't have a name because there's a God in you. Something undefinable. That's what this is about. All right, so now you see how everybody's starting to mix. This heredity thing is more serious than what we look at it as. If we don't remix back into our culture, follow ways, listen to the music, follow the meditation processes, actually make time for yourself. Stop mixing your genetics with just a bunch of group of people so you can heal and pull genetic information from trees, air, water, natural things. You're going to get sick. You're going to die faster than you're supposed to because not everybody's the same, unfortunately. And if you notice, you try to isolate yourself, they're going to try to cling to you. They're going to be like, where you going? What you doing? And since then, you're weird, you're acting strange. All these things is going to come into play. So you go, this is a very serious thing. But if you don't understand all that I'm saying about genetics, you can read it too. I think it's not genetics, my fault, the law of heredity. You need to read it because it goes deeper. This is like a one part into a few more parts that I'm gonna do, where it's like now we're gonna go look into cybernetics. Cybernetics been around way before DNA started coming around. They got information from the 20s and 30s on cybernetics. They've been mapped out genetics in basic terms. And so what we get in today is a washed down version of the government pseudo information, but cybernetics been here longer. And the information I'm gonna bring you is about how with cybernetics, by you coming to your true conscious self and not an emotional self, the animal side of you leave the fire, you don't have no emotions. What would then you be? You're a computer. Everything you do is in repetitive cycles. So either you let somebody program you, you program yourself. So the fact that you're a computer, they know that you are able to be digital. You're half and half. You're biochemical at one stage when you get into the earth. But when you get back up into space, what we call in spirit is electricity and magnetics. So what are you? You're digital information. So cybernetics from the 20s already had people traveling through phone lines, coming up in another room, people that's able to take your body apart here and put it back to there, and computers. All this been mapped out into mathematical equations so perfect that it created the machine world. Each different parts that move things is a copy of cybergenetics. And cybergenetics is actually now something that is going to be going forward today that we don't see as the cloning of everything and then putting it into a robotic form. We're denying it. We're saying it's bad. This is evil. It's real. It's real. And this is now where it's going to get funny. There's a guy that wrote back then a book on it. I think it's called God and Golem. And he states in it, he's the one who created cybernetics. I just can't remember his name here, so I won't attempt to. But he wrote that there's actual problems with it because he uses mathematical equations to go from a physical biological form and break you down all the way to where you become digital. And it's possible, yes. But then he tell you what's wrong with it. When he did everything, there was one part nobody can understand up to now in the science world and in the DNA and genetics world and quantum physics. And it's what holds the genetic information together. They could read it, they could duplicate it, they could understand it, they could take it apart and put it together, but they can't find out what holds it together. What makes you you and me me? What makes us different if everybody share the same genetic information? That's where he brings up the topic of God. It's something still science will never be able to crack, and he wrote up on this. And he's the one who deciphered the whole biochemistry of the body, biophysiology of the body, the psychology of the body. And then he left that for everybody to realize that what he drew as a conclusion of all his mathematics, all his science, is there is a God at it. And that's what we're on that path, that to realize that's your pure yourself. It's something that can be touched in you, something that make you original, but you have to be able to tap into it. All right. And so from there in the cybergenetics, we're going to go into still more. There's still more to this, because now it gets into our race. You understand, and why they're killing us, what's going on. Well, all that is going to come together as I put the story more and more. It's getting kind of dark now, and I'm getting a little thrown off key. You know, one thing is, it's when you're being a God, you can't do it with somebody else around you. Nobody can be in the room. Nobody can't witness you. That's what makes you a God. So, excuse me, through Hatha yoga and different yogas, you learn to have you a secret temple. And that secret temple is where you're going to do all your works at. This is where you let out all your splits, all your spirits, all the guardian angels, all your demions. They're going to come. And once they come, yes, sir. And once they come, you'll see that you have in your temple all your guardian spirits, all your energy. It's like you'll be in a cloud of your own that will actually work in your favor. So it's good to practice your craft in a space that nobody ever goes in, and you go in there alone, like, you know, Professor X going to Cerebro where he has a stash there. That's your energy in there. That's your gods. That's your spirit. That's your ancestors. Everybody come alive as you practice these different yogas. You know, it's deep, but you know, it ain't that simple as just go get a room and set up a altar. It starts there, yeah, in meditation, but it's a journey that you're gonna still need some assistance to. But I'm gonna try to help you so that you understand fully. And if you want to go ahead, the first stage you will have to take it would be actually going through Hatha yoga. That would be the right way, with Kundalini coming along later on. Hatha is getting your mind ready. It's preparing you for what you're gonna see. You know, with you doing that, getting your mind ready, Kundalini will activate right. It's the actual now ascension. The ascension starts with you, your consciousness waking up through Hatha yoga, dropping down to your root chakra, and then starting the journey back up as you, the pure you. Everything erased out of you. You're not no ego, you're not nothing, just consciousness. And so when you start, then you go into another level of it, which will be just the Kundalini yoga, the whole process of it. But after that, you will have to learn now another one called Kiri Yoga. All of these, it's years of discipline. And like I said, we're not concerned too much with the actual asanas or the position as much as we are the philosophy. Once you get your mind ready and you think you're ready for the journey, the rest is I could do on my own. You know, I can help you ascend. I got that ability to just connect people, you know, for some reason. It's my nightmare. But hey, anyways, I hope you get a good understanding of everything that I'm trying to explain, because we have to understand the deception. We have to understand how our mind is tricking us just to be egotistical, to say I could do this, to say I could do that. It's not something you brag about, it's a secret. Nobody knows what I do, and you're not supposed to let nobody know what you do. It's the same when God said you don't feed pearls to the swine or to dogs. They're only going to trample on it. So until a person's purified through the Hatha yoga, it's like you can't just give them any type of information, just general information to help them, you know. And if they're serious and they want it, they're going to seek the rest on their own. Anyways, I'm done here. It's getting dark. University of Conscious Science. One love.